All right, let's dive into one of the most fantastic voyages ever put to paper. We're talking about the first part of Jonathan Swift's classic Gulliver's Travels and his very first stop, the tiny, and I mean really tiny, nation of Lilliput. But here's the thing. This isn't just some fantasy adventure. Nope, it's a wickedly smart look at our own world, just shrunk way, way down.
And that brings us to the big question that hangs over this entire story, a question that is just as real today as it was 300 years ago. What if the stuff we argue about, the political battles that feel so huge and important, what if, from another angle, they're actually kind of tiny?
So, first things first, let's meet our hero. His name is Lemuel Gulliver. He's a ship's surgeon, a guy with a real thirst for adventure and seeing the world. And like a lot of great stories, his begins with a total disaster out at sea.
So a massive storm just tears his ship to pieces, and he's the only one who makes it out alive. He fights the waves for what feels like forever, until he finally washes up on the shore of this completely unknown island, the land of Lilliput, and just passes out from pure exhaustion.
You know, when he finally wakes up, it's not the sandy beach he notices. It's the fact that he absolutely cannot move. He's been pinned to the ground, tied down by what feels like a spiderweb of hundreds of little bitty ropes covering his entire body.
And then he sees them, his captors, an entire army of people who are, on average, just 6 inches tall. Can you even imagine? He stumbled into a whole civilization that could basically have a parade in the palm of his hand.
And this is where you really get a sense of the crazy difference in scale. On one hand, you've got Gulliver. He's just one guy, but to them, he's a living, breathing mountain. And on the other, you have the Lilliputans, a whole nation with an emperor and an army, but to him, they're minuscule. This massive power imbalance is what makes the whole story tick.
So, how in the world does a giant fit into a world of tiny people? Well, Gulliver goes from being this terrifying monster to, well, something else entirely, and pretty fast, too. Now, instead of just using his incredible strength to break free, Gulliver makes a really smart choice. He's peaceful, he cooperates, and this starts to earn him the trust of the Lilliputians. They take on the huge job of feeding him, which is a whole operation in itself, and eventually the emperor grants him a kind of conditional freedom. He's not a prisoner anymore, he's more like a powerful, if gigantic, part of their society.
And this is the moment Gulliver gets sucked into Lilliputian politics. And trust me, their politics are something else. It all centers on this ancient, ongoing conflict they call the Great Egg War. Yep, you heard that right. The entire nation of Lilliput is in a forever war with their neighbors, the Blefuscadians, over the correct way to crack open an egg for breakfast. This, right here, is where Jonathan Swift's satirical genius just starts to sing.
Okay, let's just walk through how this happened, because it's as ridiculous as it is tragic. It all started with a royal decree. Everyone must break their eggs on the small end. Simple, right? Well, a bunch of rebels, who they call Big Endians, refuse. They say it's an attack on their freedom. They escape to the rival island of Blefuscu, and boom, you've got a full-blown international war on your hands.
So, the Emperor of Lilliput sees his chance. He asks his new giant friend for a little favor. Gulliver just wades into the channel between the two islands, grabs some rope, ties up the entire enemy navy, and just pulls them all back to Lilliput. In one afternoon, he ends the war and becomes the biggest hero the country has ever seen.
But in the world of politics, big or small, being a hero can be a very, very risky job. Gulliver's amazing celebrity status is about to take a sharp turn, and fast. I mean, just look at this trajectory. It's a total roller coaster. He shows up as a prisoner, gets promoted to national hero, but then one act of disobedience makes him a suspect, and pretty soon he'll be a wanted traitor running for his life.
So what happened? Well, first off, just plain old jealousy. The officials in the court couldn't stand how popular and powerful he was. But the real turning point was a moral one. The emperor, who's just drunk on power at this point, orders Gulliver to go back and completely enslave Blefuscu, and Gulliver says no. This act of mercy gets twisted by his enemies into an act of treason. They start plotting against him, and he finds out their plan is to blind him.
At this point, his only choice is to run, and this leads to the last part of his adventure and the real lesson he takes away from his time in Lilliput.
And in a fantastic, ironic twist, he escapes to the very country he just conquered. He wades back across the channel to Blefuscu, and instead of being arrested, they treat him with kindness. They're actually grateful that he refused to destroy their nation.
And while he's there, by pure luck, he spots a real, human-sized boat just drifting out at sea. The Blue Fuscudians help him fix it up and get supplies, and he sails away, leaving the land of the tiny people behind him for good. He's eventually rescued by an English ship, and finally, he gets to go home.
So, was this all just a fun adventure story with a giant and some tiny people? Not a chance. Swift was using this really powerful tool called satire. He was using humor, irony, and wild exaggeration to criticize the foolishness he saw all around him, especially in politics.
And that's the whole point, isn't it? The Great Egg War was never really about eggs. It was Swift's way of mocking the pointless political and religious wars that were tearing Europe apart in his own time. It's a story about pride, about power, and most of all, about how completely absurd our most serious arguments can look if you just take one step back.
And that's what makes this story so brilliant, even all these years later. It's like a mirror. Which really makes you wonder, right? If Jonathan Swift were writing this today, what little, ridiculous arguments would he see us fighting over with life-or-death seriousness? What exactly is our modern-day egg war?